what can IndyCar learn from NASCAR? Now, a little bit context to that. NASCAR owns NASCAR, obviously, and NASCAR also owns IMSA. Both these series, under the same overall leadership, have gotten new cars. So NASCAR got the seventh generation car this year. IMSA is getting new LMDH cars in 2023 with more manufacturers than what they had in the prototype era, or sorry,
Yep.
like up until now, basically. And then they're also getting new GT3 cars. And they have a grid bigger than they can accommodate for the IMSA series, technically, especially at Daytona, at least. I think 72 cars registered, and they can only have 60 cars on the grid because of the pit lane capacity at Daytona. So clearly, both these series are doing well. In NASCAR, they
Yep.
had one of the best seasons ever. I think they were like over 15 different winners in the league, basically, before they went into the
Regular
playoffs.
season.
Yeah,
Yep.
in the
Yep.
regular season. So clearly, NASCAR is doing something great, whereas IndyCar has had failure upon failure upon failure. And we touched upon that last week, with the engine program, with the lack of growth in the audience, and with the lack of new manufacturers coming in. And now with that program, at least, we're expecting more manufacturers as time goes on, and as there are more LMH, LMDH cars available to customers and from manufacturers, basically.
Yep.
So the question is, what all can IndyCar learn from NASCAR? And I think Marshall Pruitt didn't exactly address this issue, but he did point out a few more issues that we might have missed in his Q&A on the Marshall Pruitt podcast. And something that he pointed out was the fact that the current IndyCar ownership and leadership has created a culture where criticism is not allowed. Like, they're not willing to accept the fact that they have made wrong decisions, uh,
Yep.
as
Yep.
heading the series, and the culture has become praise, praise, and praise. And if you're doing anything besides giving them praise, then it's not received well by that leadership, by that ownership. So clearly, Roger Penske and his team is not doing is not doing itself any favors, and there is a lot more that needs to be done for IndyCar to survive. Is it time for Roger Penske to? I mean, Roger Penske is not a guy who's going to give up ownership, but is it time for him to ask for help or get people in from that NASCAR organization, third American top tier motor racing series? Because clearly NASCAR, I don't know if it's growing the audience, but it's definitely retaining the audience. IMSA, I feel, has a growing audience. Even if it doesn't have a growing audience, it does have a growing presence amongst people who want to go racing. So
Yep.
manufacturers, privateers who want to go racing. So good news, right? Additionally, another thing that Marshall Pruitt pointed out was, so if you remember last week we asked the question, okay, when does the IndyCar fan get up and go, oh, this is, I've seen this too mmany times. The racing is great, but I'm sort of done with the series, right? And
Yep.
Marshall Pruitt answered that question in a different way, and he said, I think almost 75 to 80% of IndyCar viewers are over the age of 45. So in 10-15 years, there's not going to be a viewership, sort of, right? So, and more than viewership, there's not going to be people at the track to generate revenue for the promoters and the tracks that are trying to host the races. And that is the biggest issue with IndyCar. So hence the question, what more does IndyCar need to do? I think the two things we covered last time was, I think we made the comment that IndyCar should have open chassis and open engine regulations, sort of, which is what Marshall Pruitt also. I hadn't heard his podcast until then, but he said the same thing, that IndyCar needs to have like more of an open engine configuration, or open engine regulations to get
Regulations. Yeah.
more manufacturers into the sport. And the second thing we covered was regarding marketing and how quite the free marketing that is out there along with the IndyCar teams and so on and so forth. Uh, how would you take those two things and add more to it, or extend those and make those ideas more refined for IndyCar? Because another thing we need to think about is, NASCAR and IMSA are a little bit different from each other from a technical perspective. IMSA is more open-ended, at least at the top tier, with engine regulations and technical regulations, because you just
Yeah.
have to hit certain aero numbers, have a certain amount of. You can have different power, different engine configurations, but all of that is taken care of by the BOP and that sort of thing, right? So
Yeah.
it creates a narrow window of operation for all LMDH teams essentially, and the BOP becomes easy. So does IndyCar need to go the BOP way, both with chassis and engine, or just with engine? And similarly with like marketing, what needs to happen in that front, and what more needs to be added to strengthen that push towards a growth, in the series.
No, yeah. I mean, like even last week we said that to make IndyCar more attractive and to make it more successful, you needed more manufacturers to it. I mean, that's basically what IMSA is doing. They made it attractive to manufacture, for that matter. They made it attractive to manufacturers to come in and participate, because that's where the money is at. Privateers can only run customer chassis, but the development and the innovation and all those things will happen at manufacturers. Even at NASCAR, three chassis manufacturers, right?
Yeah,
Or is
and
it
all
two?
the development work is done in collaboration with the NASCAR technical team. So
Yeah,
you have Ford, Chevrolet, and
Toyota.
Toyota. Yeah.
Toyota, yeah. So three. So there's that, right? Now in IndyCar, there's only one chassis manufacturer. They don't have any competition. They don't have any risk of losing out on that deal. Even if NASCAR, even if IndyCar say that we are looking for a new chassis, Dallara will just make some tweaks and build them a new chassis. There's no competition as such, and the two engine manufacturers are working together. Like right now, the scrapping of the new engine regulations happened because they were working together, and it was a common decision. If, for example, if Honda had said like, no, we are in good in development and we'll go on with it, Chevy had to compete with Honda in that matter, right? Making it more attractive to manufacturers is the biggest key, and marketing will help with that.
I mean, if you attract more manufacturers, the manufacturers will pour money into marketing, right? That is what we are seeing
Yep.
with F1. That is what we are seeing with IMSA and WEC now, as all
Yep.
these manufacturers are
Exactly.
going racing, right? So I think that's a great point. And I really think that, okay, obviously like NASCAR has set regulations, like in terms of, okay, you have to use this capacity engine and it has to be this and this. The body has to look a certain way, and it's all common across those customer teams, right? Whereas IMSA is a lot more open, and you have to hit certain performance standards. There'll be BOP that will take care of the rest of the competition, and I think IndyCar could really go that way if that is
Yep.
if that is the feedback that they're receiving from the manufacturers. And last week we covered how the hybridization of the power units needs to be a very budget conscious decision, and why it can be a huge issue, and IndyCar could lose out on multiple teams,
Yep.
instead of growing that grid or growing the popularity. It could lose out on multiple teams. What is interesting to me is the American motorsports scene is not necessarily, I don't think it necessarily cares about the hybridization of power units. I don't necessarily cares about, because even if you look at the IMSA rules and regulations, the hybrid power unit does not have a lot of performance, does not give a performance gain to those LMDH cars. It does not. It's basically castrated. It's cut off at its knees, and it's not. It's just there to make noise, and it's another marketing ploy almost. If you're gonna talk about it like that, because if you read the race car engineering article from this month's issue, it clearly shows how the hybrid unit, especially the electric motors, they're simply replacing the engine, the internal combustion engine, at high speeds, and that's about it. And from a vehicle dynamics or vehicle control perspective, it does not make a huge difference at those speeds, because mostly it's kicking in on straights, right? So
Yep.
they're not seeing any performance gain of any sort with the hybrid unit. So they might as well run simple, IC engines. So that, and obviously NASCAR only has IC engines. They don't have a hybrid unit. They in fact have a sequential gearbox and whatnot, right? So
Sure.
that tells me that technology is not the issue in like it's not a need or a necessity or a desire of American motorsport fans, right? These can survive without that hybridization. And there are other avenues to move the series forward technologically, but it seems that because of a lack of manufacturers, they haven't been able to move that along as quickly as they would have wanted to.
Yep.
Now, obviously, the hybrid unit was being developed, I think, by a common supplier. I think we raised this question last week, but we didn't know the answer to. I think it's from a common supplier, and it's being developed together with Chevy and Honda, from what I understand. But there are other avenues, right? Because even juniors categories now in Europe, especially, are going on to sustainable fuel. So why hasn't IndyCar thought about that? I think the short answer to that is because the American motorsports scene, at least, or the American automotive industry right now, is not really into sustainable fuels, and it's all moving towards hybrid and electric, right? So Chevy, which is one of the two players, they're going all electric in the future, and sustainable fuel been in conversation with Chevy. Toyota is a different story because Toyota America division is separate from the rest of the Toyota Racing or whatever, right? So it's hard to comment there. But getting or buying fuel that is compatible with these two might be a cheaper option that they haven't explored. And it could still move. If it's not moving the series towards the future in the eyes of the American audience, I feel it is still moving the series into the future or growing the series from an international audience perspective, because that green fuel, the sustainable fuel narrative is very much prominent in Europe and the rest of the world, basically, especially in the motorsport scene with what the junior series are doing following F1, or even like before F1 in the case of F2 and F3 especially.
Again, as you pointed out in the starting of this conversation, the leadership needs to look at itself and just find, like, they I don't know, I'm referencing to Haas, right?
Spend money to make money, basically.
Yeah, like they need to sort of put an ambitious goal or whatever and want to grow. Like, if they don't want to grow, they will not grow, sort of. If they want to go forward, they will work towards it. And yeah,
because I think like I'm of the opinion that all these automotive manufacturers who have declared that they'll go all electric by 2030, 2035, whatever, is a huge mistake. And I'm a big believer in sustainable fuels. AVL is doing a lot of work with hydrogen, combustion engine cars and fuel cell cars. So is Toyota, Honda. I think Toyota or Honda also ran a 24-hour race, I think last year or earlier this year, somewhere in Japan, with a hydrogen combustion engine. So I'm a big believer in diversification of these various alternative energy paths, right? So,
yeah,
and all these automotive manufacturers going all electric is really market driven, which is sort of sad, because the ideology that the consumer does not know what they want.
yeah,
And
yeah,
Elon Musk, in my opinion, created the need for electric cars more than anything else. And he told the consumers what they wanted in the future instead of, listening to them. Because if they continue to listen to the consumers, then he would also be producing ICE cars. Tesla would be
yeah,
another car
absolutely,
company, right?
absolutely.
So, and really, it's the inertia of and I don't want to get into it too much, but again, so IndyCar is starting to operate somewhat like that, where it's trying to go where the market is going instead of creating its own, image or whatever you want to call it, like creating its own path, forging its own path, right? So yeah, again, I think that some hard decisions need to be made by the IndyCar leadership, basically, to see, okay, what is our 10-year, 15-year plan to grow this series. But yeah, all right. Anything you would like to add to that?
They need to want something to get there, right?